Welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that can change everything. This is a place for you to bring those difficult conversations that you've been mulling over, that you've been thinking about while you've been walking around, doing the washing up or commuting to work. I'm Stanway. I am a philosopher, psychotherapist of 25 years, divorce and breakup coach, and I help people in the moments where there's a difficult conversation they just don't know how to handle. This is a moment, your moment, to pause, reflect, and have a bit of breathing space to think about what matters to you and how to tackle those difficult moments. Using insight, reflection, case studies, and examples, I will guide you through those difficult conversations in a safe and constructive way. So let's begin. Hello, my name is Stanway, and today I want to speak about something that comes up pretty often actually during coaching sessions, whether I'm working with couples or whether I'm working with individuals. And this is about the grief of the childhood that we did not have. So for many of us, when we do work, whether we're doing coaching work or other kinds of works, one of the most difficult conversations that we have is actually the one with ourselves, where we have to come to terms with the fact that the more we discover about our childhood, perhaps it was a childhood where we can't remember too much that happened, or we have kind of sketchy memories. And slowly during the process of understanding ourselves better, we have to start acknowledging, have to start saying to ourselves that we're carrying grief about what was missing. Perhaps there wasn't enough safety, there wasn't enough encouragement, they didn't feel that there was enough attention or emotional connection in our childhood. Perhaps that's because we had parents who were busy, working really hard, really struggling. So there's a thing called adverse childhood experiences, which I've spoken about before. And some of these are neglect-based and some of them are actually abuse-based. But I want to talk a little bit about the neglect side. Neglect can happen unintentionally, and it's a little bit like bullying. It's about how it's perceived, not actually how it's delivered. So, for example, if somebody says something unkind, it may be that they will say, well, I don't think it's unkind, but it did feel unkind. So some of the neglects that happen in childhood are emotional neglect. That means not getting what we need emotionally. Sometimes it's physical neglect, not getting enough to eat or not getting enough of warmth or safety or security. And sometimes it is psychological neglect, where we don't get enough stimulation or enough the education or learning or actually teaching that we need. So that might, for example, be a parent who is under pressure, who might be quite snappy with a kid, but not have paid attention to the fact that they haven't perhaps taught the kid the right thing to do or the right way to behave. And that can be something that we can carry around in ourselves. We're looking at the intention of a parent and knowing that they did love us and they did care about us, but nonetheless, we felt that gap. And that can be a sadness. That is a grief. It's a loss. And the grief cycle is feeling angry, feeling denial, feeling that we're going to bargain it away and say, oh, well, I know it hurt, but I know they didn't help. They didn't mean it. And sometimes it's just straight sadness, and then it's acceptance. It can be going, this is the way that it was. And I can feel really sad and mourn the way that it was. Coming to that space of mourning is really, really important. But one of the key things that I see, and this is important when it comes to separation and divorce, is that mourning of what didn't happen can flip the other way when we've got children, when we're going through separation and divorce, or in fact any difficult circumstance, where we can say our child is mourning something. Perhaps we've moved house and they've changed schools. Perhaps a really good friend of theirs has moved away. Perhaps it could be mourning because a pet has died or because something else has happened. Sometimes it can be the birth of a new child. As adults, we really celebrate the birth of a new child, but for a child within a family, that child's position within the family gets abruptly changed, often with a mother who's much more focused on the new child, and that can feel like a real grief or loss for the other children. And I see this very often when I'm working in families. I think sometimes people are surprised that I'm interested to know the birth order and the distance of time between each child being born. And that allows me to look at the psychological developmental age of the child in that moment and consider, well, what age were they at when the new child was born, and what might that have done to their psychosocial development in that moment? And I will do a whole episode of that. So when parents are worrying about their children during separation and divorce, sometimes there's an unconscious recognition of the things that they missed out in their childhood, and now they're worried about the children missing out on those things. But here's what I want to say in this short episode that I'm putting on. We as humans can all cope with disappointment and change. It is hardwired into our nervous system to be able to do that. Being supported and helped to cope with that disappointment and change is what children need from adults. Being able to hear our children be angry, be in denial, be trying to bargain it away, or be sad is part of helping the child go through their own grief. So children go through grief and adults go through grief, and that's to do with adjusting to things being different. And the grief cycle is actually very clever adaptation that humans have, because it allows a human to, if they're able to process their grief, go through all the aspects, trying to pretend it didn't happen, getting really annoyed that it happened, trying to find some way of bargaining the disappointment away, just feeling terribly, terribly sad, and then accepting, and then sometimes going back. So if you are going through separation and divorce, and I do want to guide you to my website, and you can see the details in the notes, it's www.evestanway.co.uk, where I've got a free webinar that you can download about talking to your children about separation and divorce. But in this episode, what I want to emphasize in this short burst is recognizing that when things happen, our children are going through grief, and that we're not going to become grief counselors, but what we can do is recognize that, and that their pain is part of their healthy processing of what's going on. And if we're able to be alongside them during that, if we're able to listen to them, if we're able to empathize, if we can contain our desire to problem solve, because most of you out there who are listening who have children will say something like, but I just want them to be happy. One of the absolute honors and privileges of being a parent of children is having that ability, that facility, being able to be with them and guide them through the periods of unhappiness that happen in their lives. And that's not because we're making them unhappy, although it could be that our choices did lead to their unhappiness. But the world can be an unhappy place. And as we are working really hard to protect our children from harm, which is exactly the right thing to do, what we sometimes do, well, I would say actually we always have to do as parents, is recognize that we can't protect them from disappointment. We can't protect them from grief. Now, on a kind of serious note about grief, grief has another funny facility. So grief does have anger, denial, pretending it's not happening. Yeah, I'm fine, it's not bothering me, I don't care. Bargaining, well, I'll be fine if this, that, and the other happens. Sadness, and then acceptance. Now, the sadness aspect is really important. If we can't process that sadness, it compounds with all the losses that we experience in life. And loss is normal. It's a normal part of life, whether we're losing our favorite pen, or whether we're losing our dog, or whether we're losing our home, or whether we're losing a friend. Loss is a normal thing. The sadness aspect of loss, if we don't process it, can compound over time. It becomes more complicated and more complex. It kind of stacks up. And over time, this can look like depression. It can look like it's depression. Now, depression is a different thing. Depression can happen when bad things are happening to us. It can be exacerbated. But depression is to do with changes in our brain, to do with our serotonin levels and other things that are happening within us. So depression can happen, it can be triggered by some life event, but it can also be something that we can carry around. Now, the treatment for depression is very, very different from the treatment for grief. The treatment for grief is about talking and processing and being allowed to really feel those feelings so that we can go through them. The treatment for depression can be somewhat different, to do with cognitive behavioural therapy and to do with medication very often. And although I would never push anybody to medication, medication really does have its place. So understanding the difference between grief and the sadness that comes with grief and what it looks like if it's not been allowed to be processed is really, really important. So please do reach out if something here really resonates with you. This is a very important topic, and I know this is a short episode, but I'm going to be coming back and talking about this a lot, because separation and divorce, problems in childhood, cause grief. The grief cycle is something that is very important to understand, because the grieving process is what allows us to recover from loss and change. In a society where we're really trying to protect our children from emotional, we are potentially at risk of preventing them actually from processing their grief. And so having that balance, having really good advice on that is really, really important. A child who looks like they're coping may be fine, they may be coping, or they may be in denial, or they may be in bargaining, or they may be in sadness, or they may be in anger. They're acting out at school, all of a sudden they're getting into trouble, or they're not paying attention. And that can happen. If the grief doesn't get processed, those signs can happen years later with children, because their brain is developing all the time, and so how they process their emotions and feelings varies over time. So there may be a time in their life when they simply can't do it, and then their developmental stages move on, or they read something or something happens, and then it starts to come out. So my key message really for this episode is, first of all, please share it with anybody that you know who's going through this, understanding that grief is real. It's a real thing. And we process grief by talking about it, by sharing how we feel. So if we have a child who's going through some difficult times, being able to listen to them without problem solving is part of helping them get through that grieving process. Grief is different from depression, but if grief doesn't get resolved over time, it can look like depression. And we want to be very careful, because the treatment of depression is very different from the treatment for grief. So I hope that's been useful for you today. Please do reach out in the comments. Please like, please share. And I really look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Take good care of yourself.